Let's talk about behaviors related to executive function. So there are a number of rating scales that are available to measure executive function. I'm going to focus just very briefly on the CEFI and the CEFI adult. The main difference between these two measures that I've published and others is that it's strength-based. So my concept of executive function is executive function as an ability. So to me, that means the higher the score, the better. And I like to express it in a standard score, the mean of 100 and SD of 15, like a typical ability test would be expressed. And so that's a very important aspect of these. Both of these instruments provide scores across the 9 dimensions that I mentioned, as well as a total score, and some other scores like negative, positive impression, and so on. And I want to clarify a question that often comes up. If you say executive function is one thing, why do you have 9 scales and 9 scores, and how do we use those scores? And to answer that question, I'm actually going to show you the very first case that we ever worked on. This was actually a case that nicely illustrates how we would analyze the 9 scores. If you look down the column that says standard score on the left-hand side, you'll see a 95 for attention and 82 for emotion regulation, and so on down, all the way down. And you see that the child's average is 101.7. So we compare each one of those scores on those nine scores to that 101.7, and we see the attention scores 6.7 points below the youth's average. And that is actually a statistically significant difference, but we don't list it as a weakness because it's clearly in the average range. Whereas the emotion regulation score, 19.7 points below the individual's average, is statistically significant, and because it's so low, it's a 12th percentile, we would call that a weakness, and using similar logic, we have 2 strengths. Now, the overall score for this person is very average, so we would not say they have an executive function disorder, but they do have a self-regulation problem. And what we found when we worked with this student more is that the student really had anxiety disorder, and that emotion regulation was more related to anxiety, not related to executive function. We use these part scores to better understand what the total means. Now, had this person had 3 or 4 or 5 low scores, the total would have been low, and then we would have been able to explain what that total score means according to these specific areas, and of course that leads right to intervention. And we have the same system that's used for the CEFI adult. And so these treatment scales really are about understanding what the total score means. But any one of these in and of themselves is not going to be sufficient. You need a collection of them before the total score is low enough to say that there's an overall executive function failure. And just very quickly here, we do provide all this kind of information in the automated reports. Now, if you're thinking about, okay, how would we address those 9 areas? Well, for middle school and high schoolers, one solution is this. This is a curriculum that I actually helped develop with some teachers at an alternative high school near where I live in Fairfax, Virginia, efintheclassroom.net. You can go to this website, and we have lesson plans for every one of the 9 areas that are in the CEFI and the CEFI adult, and it's all free. The lesson plans, the video links, what you do and how you do it, it's all for free. And I encourage you to take a look at that and try those out. They could be done in small groups if you do small group work. I think they could be even done individually, one-on-one, and certainly on classroom-wide classroom-wide intervention.